Hey everyone, Cody here, and I just want to tell you about how faithful God is and a couple of signs that He confirmed in something that I asked Him about. That basically this video is just I'm very excited that God would confirm this stuff and just proof that He is faithful and He does hear us. Now, I'll share the story and then you can kind of draw your own conclusion. So there's a conference that my wife and I were considering going to later this year, like in a few months. And we were kind of on the fence. Well, she really wants to go. I was kind of on the fence. And so I basically put out a couple of golden fleeces like Gideon did in the Bible, where I was like, okay, if we're meant to go to this, because it's in Colorado, I was like, then I want two signs, not just one sign, because you could say that it's coincidence, but I want two specific signs. And at first, I didn't tell my wife what they were. I just said, hey, I have two things that I want to happen in order for us to go to confirm like that I want God to kind of supernaturally work out in order for us to confirm. And she's like, okay. So now I said by the end of the month. So today is the 28th of March, and I said that I wanted it done by the end of the month because they had to buy the tickets anyway. So the first sign was that I would see something like in writing about a town in Colorado that I've never even heard of. Like a town I've never literally, it couldn't be like on a map. Like I couldn't just look on a map and find, some random city. No, I had to be reading something that referenced a town in Colorado that I had never heard of. So that was the first fleece. And my wife and I recently started a podcast. And when we were researching, so we were shooting a couple of episodes a few days ago because I had the day off. And before that, we were looking at names for the podcast. And when we were looking at all these different names, only one stuck out. And so the name for the podcast was Sacred Blend. And you may actually be able to go to our channel. There should be a link in the description. I know, self plug, but it's just called Coty and Amanda, so you can find it. But anyway, we were shooting our first episode of the Sacred Blend podcast. Well, when we looked up that name, no other podcast came up for that name, so we were pretty excited. But what did come up is for a store in Colorado, just a single store, not even a chain, a single store in Colorado in a town I'd never heard of. So I was like, okay. Well, once again, I kind of took it as a sign, but I was like, I'm not convinced. I need to see this other, fleece or this other sign for confirmation. So the other sign that I asked God for was to see something in writing, like a physical print that said Santa Fe, because someone at our church who was going to the conference was talking about, they're like, oh, we might stop in Santa Fe, which is in New Mexico. It's not even in Colorado. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. Like, I'd like to go there too. But I was like, I don't know. We'll see. So my sign to God was that, God would show me the words Santa Fe in writing. Now, you have to understand that it's been a couple weeks since I made that decision to wait for the signs. Um, and then it kind of got to today. And I was feeling that they had to buy the tickets as a group to get the discount. So I was like, I don't want to hold them back. We'll just go ahead and buy the tickets. But I had not seen that second sign of Santa Fe at all. Like I'm talking about days, and I had not seen those words. And so I told my wife today, I was like, when I got home from work, I was like, all right, you know what? Just go ahead and tell them to buy the tickets tomorrow or tonight. And, if I don't see Santa Fe, then it's fine. It's on me. Right. She's like, okay, great. She got super excited and they did pay for the tickets. Well, my wife and I go to therapy every other Thursday. And it's not like there's something wrong with us. We actually are just going to family therapy to stay on the up and up. But we also plan on bringing our kids. And it's just, I've found it actually to be beneficial. And I know a lot of people have an aversion to going to therapy, but I actually have found it really beneficial. And I'm not too prideful to be like, no, I have no issues. I didn't want to go at first, but there are some reasons why I have continued to go because I have found a lot of benefit in it. But anyway, that's not a, I'm not trying to sell people on therapy. I'm just saying, I've found it beneficial, or we have as a couple. Anyway, so we have therapy just about every other Thursday, and then we go to dinner. And where we go to dinner is different depending on, what we want or, when therapy ends and stuff like that. So tonight we go to therapy and then we go to dinner. And we ended up going to Cheddar's, which, depending on where you live and you're watching this, Cheddar's is just like a from scratch restaurant. And we had looked at other places to go, right? So we were looking around to see what else was out there. A lot of the other places that were still open because, therapy is at night. So a lot of places close. And when we looked around and looked at the stuff that was in the area, or even on the way home, a lot of it was either really low rated restaurants. I mean, like 2 stars and stuff. And I was like, ugh, I really don't want to eat that. Or we had even just considered on going home because we had eaten at Cheddar's before, like after therapy. So we were going to try to go somewhere else. But really, nothing else was open or it wasn't rated well. And my wife was like, "Oh, do you just want to go home?" I was like, "No, it's fine. We'll go to eat." So we end up going to Cheddar's. And sure enough, we go to Cheddar's and we go to order. And we're looking at the appetizers. And one of the appetizers on the menu is a Santa Fe, like queso dip or something like that. And it's funny because I read it and it didn't even dawn on me at first. I just saw it and I'm just like staring at it and I felt drawn to it. I was like staring at it. I was like, why am I looking at this? Like, I'm not even, it doesn't even sound good. It didn't even dawn on me that it said Santa Fe. My wife was looking at it. She was like, oh, that's funny. It says Santa Fe. And so I was like, okay, I get it. Um, And it's funny because right before we saw that, my wife's boss's boss, so one of the pastors at the church who's going, text her like a smiley face or whatever that, that we were going to go, right? So he said that like right before we saw that on the page. And I knew like as soon as we saw it, I was like, okay, this is confirmation. Because I'm telling you, days went by and I didn't see it. But for me to finally decide today that we could go and then I see it, I don't know. You can draw your own conclusions. Sure, there could be, lightning could strike twice, could be two completely different coincidences. But I feel in my spirit that that's not the truth. Like it was meant to happen. And it's funny because I wondered if this was going to happen. I wondered if, we were going to see that confirmation after I had already decided to go. Um, I had a hunch, and it was one of the reasons I was okay telling her, like, let's do it instead of no, let's not do it because I didn't see it. I had a hunch that I might see it after I had already agreed. And technically speaking, the sign was before the end of the month. So I still saw that confirmation before the end of the month. So even though, I'm sorry, I shook the table. Even though I had, already agreed, I still saw the sign before the end of the month. So I don't know. For me, that's pretty exciting. It's not the first time this has ever happened where I've asked God to, show me a flee. I've fleeced God and asked Him to show me something in order to confirm it. But it was just funny to see it happen and then, feel pretty much confirmed that it happened. Now, I want to hit on something real quick before I leave because I didn't want to just tell my story. First off, if you have a story like that where you know that God came through for you because you asked for a sign, please share it in the comments because I think that people need to see that God does, He does answer us when we ask for confirmation on things. Now, I want to make 2 points. First off, God is not bound by our conditions. Okay. So even if we ask God for a sign on something, sometimes we see that and sometimes we don't. Or maybe we do see it, but we don't notice because we're not paying attention or distracted or it's not the sign we expect to see. Right. And I actually think that this is the problem with the Israelites or the Jews, we should call them. and that why they killed Jesus, because they were expecting this big ruler, right? And it's funny that I'm bringing this up on Passover. I didn't even realize that. And tomorrow's Good Friday. But anyway, I think that the Jews were waiting for a ruler that was going to come, like a military ruler, and free them from the oppression of Rome. But Jesus wasn't the Messiah that they were expecting. They knew about him, but he didn't come the way they expected. And so they were looking elsewhere. And I think that we fall into the same trap sometimes, that God does show us, like, hey, this is what you've been asking for. This is what I've been wanting you to see, and you're not paying attention. Now, the second point that I want to put in there is I know that I'm probably going to get some comments on this video where people are going to say things like, you shouldn't test God, and, it's not our place to ask for signs from God. But I would question that. Like, I would challenge that. Like, why? Because it's not that I'm testing God in the fact that, like, well, God, you better do this. No, 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 no. My heart is humble. Like, I'm not saying, God, you have to do this. I'm saying, God, if you really want this from me, then show it to me. And it's more about confirming his will than it is testing it, right? I'm saying, God, if this is according to your will, then show me that thing. Like, I want to be in accordance to your will. I don't want, it's not about me and just doing whatever the heck I want. No, no, no. It's, if this is according to your will, then show me. So I think there's a difference in testing God, like, oh, God, you better come through for me, or you better do this or that, versus actually submitting to his will and saying, listen, Lord, if not my will be done, but yours. Like, if you want me to go on this trip, if something's going to happen out of it, either for me or for someone else, then yeah, work this out for me. So I think there's a difference there. But the other aspect of that, or a couple of examples that I would give to really kind of back this claim up, is Gideon, right? So I already mentioned Gideon, but really Gideon's a great example of that, right? Gideon said, like, if this is your will, then I want the dew to be around the fleece and not on it. And that happens. And then he says, okay, the dew only on the fleece and not on the ground. And that happens too. And so God did do those things to confirm in him what he wanted him to do. And even with Abraham, when Abraham was pleading for Sodom and Gomorrah, he's like, look, if I go down and find 50 people, will you save it? Or 45 or 40 or 30 or 10 or 20 or 10. And God agreed. God was like, okay, sure, I'll do that. And he just kept agreeing, right? And so he kept doing it. And even Jacob, like becoming Israel, right? He wrestled with God, and Jacob's like, well, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. God did that. And so I think that there's a difference between just demanding things of God and asking things of God and saying, God, you kind of make a bargain, right? You're like, God, can I bargain with you? And it just makes me think of that scene from Doctor Strange. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Um, but essentially, I really think that it's not like we're challenging God and saying, like, God, you better do this. I think if we come humbly before God and make a request, we're not in the wrong. We're not in the wrong for asking for the thing. But again, God is not bound to do it. He doesn't have to do anything. God is sovereign. God is the one that makes all the decisions, and we just live by those decisions. But I don't think it's wrong of us to ask him if he would do things, if he would confirm things or work things out in a certain way. I don't think it's a sin to ask. We just can't go in expecting that he will do it just because we asked, right? It's just like my kids ask me all the time to do things or buy them stuff or let them, get into things, right? And I have to constantly tell them no, right? And they get disappointed because I said no. But what they don't understand is there's a reason why I don't let them do things. Well, it's the same thing with God. There are certain reasons why he doesn't let things happen that we are just bound and determined to have happen because he knows better than we do. So I don't think it's wrong to ask. I don't think it's wrong to pray about it and say, God, would you move in this situation? But he's not bound to it. So we can't get our expectations up here and say, well, God's going to do it just because I asked. No, but I don't think it's wrong to ask anyway. But those are my verses. You can put what you think in the comments. I mean, I don't know everything, and I'd really love to hear anyone else's counterpoints because I don't, I'm interested genuinely. So anyway, that's about it. That's all I got for this video. If you haven't checked out my other channels, I don't really mention a lot, but I do have multiple channels. So I've got the podcast channel with my wife, where it's actually just a YouTube channel with podcasts. It's called Coty and Amanda. That's below. I've got a prayer only channel called Radiant Salvation. That's also below. All it is prayers. And then I have another channel that is called Success in Scripture. That is also below, and that's a channel just going over like Bible verses regarding success and money and wealth and stuff like that, and also just real world stuff pertaining to that. So anyway, that's about it. I appreciate you watching, every person that does, and I pray that God blesses you, and because it's Passover, so just be grateful for everything that God has done for you, and yeah, I don't know what else to say. I just love God, and I just pray his blessing upon you. So that's about it. See ya.